Hola, bienvenidos a la clase de español. So I hope you remember what you learned recently about conjugating verbs in the future tense, because today I want to talk to you about the conditional. And the conditional tense is similar to the future tense in a couple of ways. First, the conditional refers to a time in the future, but unlike the future, it's not definite. It refers to something that would happen if certain conditions are met, hence the conditional tense. You can also think about it as a potential future, thinking about what could happen in the future. Another way it's similar to the future tense is that the conditional tense corresponds to using the word would plus a verb. So where the future tense kind of stood in for the word will, because there's no word for will in Spanish, the conditional tense fills in for the word would. There's no word for would, W-O-U-L-D, in Spanish. So to use the word would for a potential future action, you would just conjugate a verb in the conditional. Now, as far as conjugating goes, the conditional tense is similar to the future in that as well. And by that, I mean that instead of dropping the ending, with the conditional tense, we're going to use the whole infinitive for regular verbs. Additionally, all verbs, whether they're AR, ER, IR, or irregular verbs, are going to have the same endings in the conditional. Now, to get our conditional endings, we want to think back to the imperfect tense. Wait a minute, you're thinking. The imperfect? We already did that. That's in the past. Why, yes, the imperfect is in the past. But if you think back to the imperfect ER and IR endings, those are the same as the conditional endings for all verbs. So what makes the imperfect different than the conditional? Well, you may remember that in the imperfect, you dropped the ending. In the conditional, you do not. So my conditional tense endings for all verbs are going to be ia, ias, ia, iamos, iais, and ian. And there's an accent on the first I in all of those endings. Now, just like we had in the imperfect tense, the yo form and the usted al ella form have the same ending in the conditional. So to differentiate and keep track of who would do something, it's going to be more common in Spanish to use the pronoun or the subject along with the yo or the usted al ella form. So I'm going to ask that you put those pronouns, yo, usted al ella, in all verb charts for those two forms. So that's it for regular verbs. You're going to take the whole infinitive plus your conditional endings, which are the same as the ER, IR imperfect endings. Now there are some irregulars, but the good news is they're the same exact irregulars as we had in the future tense. So if you think back to those irregulars in the future, we had three groups. Same three groups here. The first group, quick people have sushi, is going to be irregular in the same way it was irregular in the future tense. That is, for the verbs querer, poder, haber, and saber, we're going to drop the E. And then we're going to put our conditional endings for all the forms right onto the end of that stem. So for querer, the yo form would be yo querría. For poder, yo podría. For haber, yo habría. And for saber, yo sabría. Now with haber, we probably wouldn't use that in the yo form. We'd use that, just like we did in the future, in the third person singular, which is also habría, but with no pronoun. And that would translate as there would be. For the second group, we're going to have the same saying, vroom says the Porsche, and those verbs are going to be irregular in the same way they were in the future tense. That is to say, we change the E or the I in the ending to a D. So for venir, salir, tener, and poner, the yo form in the conditional is going to be vendría, saldría, tendría, and pondría. Remember that these verbs are irregular in all the forms. I'm just giving you the yo form to illustrate what that irregularity looks like in a conjugated form of the verb. For the third group, they're still going to be los rebeldes, the rebels, because you can't tell them what to do. Those verbs are decir and hacer. And when you conjugate them, they turn into los piratas, the pirates, because they say dir and ar. So for decir, the yo form in the conditional, yo diría. And for hacer, yo haría. Now the conditional generally corresponds to using the word would in English. So I could use it in the statement, yo llevaría las gafas de sol, pero no estoy afuera. I could also use it to say something like, Yo tocaría la guitarra en un video, pero nunca me permiten. Pero quizás me permitirían tocar el bajo. ¿Podrías dejar de tocar el bajo, por favor? Este video no se trata de música. Or I could say something like, con más tiempo, jugaría al videojuego Fortnite por muchas horas. Or I could say, yo enseñaría las ciencias, pero no soy el señor Groves. Remember, when conjugating verbs in the conditional, don't drop the ending for regular verbs. It's got the same irregulars as the future tense, and the endings are the same as the er, ir endings from the imperfect. Also, the conditional generally corresponds to using the word would in English. Gracias por ver este video. Adiós.